we actually like so it's like I had very much smaller and so we've been more
Okay, your presentation is open. And to begin with this slideshow display. Just make sure you speak into the mic.
Yeah. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah. So, and hi. So we'll just start our next session. This is Dr. Nikos Koutras, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for our people staying behind. We appreciate you. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, once again, I'd like to thank the organizing committee for giving me the chance to share my research in progress about this. I'd like to disclose from the very beginning that this is a template, so you might get for your information. I've been in different conferences, and I can attest that this one is the one that talks about open access. And I also would like to disclose the fact that in my discipline, there are not so many people that they do, advocate on open access. So I like to be the exception because exception actually validates the law according to grammar. So further to that, it's a great opportunity to share with you my perspective, and I also like to, as I will show you, I like to follow this kind of reasoning that I'm going to initially talk about international jurisdictions, and then I will focus to Australian one, because I think that what is missing in Australia in terms of open access, I have heard a lot of things about policies. So yes, indeed, that is something that we should definitely be addressed. But what can be Australia become a front runner in terms of open access is the fact that there should be actually gradually an integration of an open access provision in the Copyright Act, as there are in other countries. And I'm reflecting the Netherlands, where there is such open access provision, and I have had the chance to visit during my second postdoc research project. So I think that there is a global consensus about open access, and I think this conference is a great demonstration of that. Different perspectives, numbers speak themselves, I think so, and there is this global consensus that should also incentivize the government in Australia to act accordingly. But definitely we all agree that due to the technological developments, which is ongoing and will always be, we will certainly have to encounter a few number of challenges. So one of these challenges is to provide high quality of education, but at the same time this high quality education and relevant material should be quite properly attached to these technological advancement tools to be just to satisfy the equity, so to be remotely accessed, and apart from also securing that it's going to be remotely accessed, at the same time these materials should also be user-friendly. So that means that we should also be trained in such way so to integrate this educational material, giving this character, this nature of open to students in such a way that it's going to be user-friendly. It is not going to be a great incentive for them to engage with. So I was really while I was working on my first doctoral degree in political science, that was the argument was standing actually about the Lisbon Treaty, which was introduced in 2009. It was a European initiative because there was this driven knowledge society was starting to arise, So therefore, European Union trying to invest to introduce an initiative so this to be captured. And at the same time, through this Lisbon strategy, and the Lisbon Treaty specifically, the concept of lifelong learning was introduced. And this lifelong learning was founded through these three concepts. So research, education, and innovation. So there is mainly, and the argument of my thesis, first PhD, was that open educational resources is the future in terms of education, in terms for informed decisions, in terms of enrich people to enhance their knowledge background, and that was mainly the thing that gave me a lot of interest. And once I concluded that, I realized that something more formal in terms of a legal framework should also be there, because apart from the policy, there should be also a law framework to embrace this policy. So this was actually the reason that I also go for the second doctoral degree, which was acquired at Macquarie University, by the way. And once I arrived in Australia, in Western Australia, I got inspired from a lot of things, apart from the beautiful nature. I was just realized that I was not on my own in terms of open access. And the thing that was made me greatly convinced that there is a ground of discussion and there is a lot of reasoning to further argue about the importance of open access was mainly two things, specifically for Australia. First one was the federal inquiry that was already closed in February 2022, where the federal was trying to introduce a bill. So it was trying to have been disseminated to people to submit and express their point of view about this bill. Anyway, the bill never became act. But the thing is that we had 109 submissions for this bill that I also analyzed later on in the presentation. I will also share with you this. That was one of my main incentives. And this is where the concept of and the importance of access opportunities to be enhanced, these opportunities, was introduced in Australia in terms of copyright discussion. And the second one, which is really important, is that the Australia's chief scientist, Dr. Catherine Foley, recently published a roadmap, for open access in Australia. And I realized that respecting that we have this high authority having a perspective about open access, I said, okay, there we are. I should invest on these 2 points and further improve and strengthen my argument. So that's the main reasoning about insisting on this for Australia. So as I said before, I was inspired also from my experience in Netherlands. And I also had the chance to, I went for a research visit for one month and conduct face-to-face interviews with national stakeholders about open access. And specifically, that was in 2018. And there, while I was conducting this service, I realized that there was an amendment, the Tavernian Amendment, that's Provision 25 FA of the Dutch Copyright Act. In accordance with open access, there is open access provision in the copyright itself, which is, and this provision, it was an extra push to the publishers, which is, they have this gatekeeping role of knowledge. And it was a great push, and as you can see, the literature is quite important. There is a great impact since this amendment, since this provision in terms of open access implementation, and of course the dissemination of knowledge and information sources, and education information sources. So that's, I will, let's say now, continue with the more international perspective in terms of this global consensus that I mentioned before. So these are a few examples from overseas jurisdictions that open access has been introduced. To be honest, sometimes I do not enjoy the fact that there is a mandate policy, because even talking about mandate policy, so where's the academic freedom? But that's my point of view. But anyway, there are some policies introduced for open access in these institutions overseas, South Africa as well, in Africa as well, and Singapore, as you can see. And that's another demonstration that open access is there, and we should also take that into account, that there is, as I mentioned before at the beginning of the presentation, we should also have a policy settled already institutionally. Back to Australia, as we can also see, there's a number of initiatives that support the open access implementation in a more formal way, in a legal way, as I'm arguing. And apart from that, already this initiative and this take place in Koutras University has been addressed from the previous presenters about cocky. And apart from that, also Australia is part of the Plan S, at the same time one of the signatory countries, which is quite helpful, again, in terms of my argument. Another important thing about Australia is that, and also about generally social phenomena, is that there is always a philosophy and a history behind that. So I then tracked down the historical development of Copyright Act. I was initially trying to understand why Copyright Act has this year, 1968, and I was saying, what about, I mean, I was trying to, because I'm from a civil law country, so I couldn't, because there are codes and norms in there, so here it's common law, it's slightly different. But I understand that, yes, Copyright Act 1968 has the main principles, and we work around them more or less. That's the main foundation, let's say. And I was trying to track down exactly how many times the legislative body of Australia has been considered about copyright regulations. So these are short, let's say, historical background of this discussion. But the most important thing that I also have already published a paper in Schematic Journal is this one that took place, and I mentioned before, the federal inquiry about the Copyright Amendment Access Reform Bill. And what this bill introduced, it was really fascinating from my point of view. During my postdoctoral experience in Belgium, I also had a chance to visit Germany, the University of Hamburg. So I followed during the lesson for the ANOVA analysis. So the ANOVA analysis is the analysis of variation. So I did apply this analysis for these 109 submissions. And what I did realize is that there is something. So people, the stakeholders of Australia have already started explicitly address the importance of open access. What I did actually, I had 3 different variations. So I checked for open, I checked for access, and then together open access. But mainly, what you can see here is the open access variation, which has been addressed from 40.3%, which is quite great from my point of view. And I also provide you in quite indicative some of the stakeholders, and this indicates the right-hand side of the table how many times they have addressed in their submissions the term of open access, and which is quite significant. But as I said, this is not it's those that have high numbers in terms of addressing the open access in their submissions for this public inquiry, which is another quite supportive for my argument about the importance of an integration of open access provision into the Australian Copyright Act. Again, we have policies in universities of Australia as well. We need to devote more time on this. And apart, I also got an internal funding recently for another research program, and the main question actually it's follow-up of the public inquiry, the federal public inquiry, because I managed to publish the paper on that, and now I'm working with my research associate on this program, and we have already conducted interviews with a great number of these 109 stakeholders. To be honest, and not so many participate in this questionnaire for questions for us. Already 26 or something, which is quite a considerable amount. We will shortly publish the outcomes and some primary thoughts about this follow-up process and their perspective in terms of open access, the proposal for open access provision, because if we build an argument about this necessity, I think that we can then refer to the higher authorities to make an official proposal. Because at the very end, I'm also a person that I'm characterized from the motto of, in Latin, dum spiro spero, that means that I will lose my hope. So I would better fight for the best and get as much as possible the best result. This is actually my recommendations, which have been published a year ago about how this can be. Do I do something?
I think you might have it on automatic sort of.
Oh, okay. So actually my recommendations is basically focused on this definition section of the Copyright Act. I'm proposing 4 things to be introduced and addressed. Okay, I will just then stop it into that. So the main point is that my recommendations focuses on the definition section of the Copyright Act. From a law point of view and perspective, every parliamentary act has its, let's say, main concepts addressed in the definition section. So what is missing for this to take place and accommodate the open access integration is that the research outcomes are not addressed. So basically, all my recommendations about the Copyright Act is surrounding this concept which is missing in the Copyright Act. And again, I repeat, to enhance and accommodate the gradual integration of open access. So based on this presentation, I think that yes, Australia, and there is a great support about this potential for Australia to take, to play a most important role in terms of open access, because there is a lot of data online. So for example, there is a registry of open access repositories, the roadmap, and according to these stats over there, you can see that Australia has great numbers in terms of the alignment with Horizon Europe, Horizon 20, that has been converted since 2021 to Horizon Europe, and there's great alignment with in terms of open access. And given that, and we have already 33 policies addressed in Australia, so Australia is front-running the Oceania continent. So therefore, let's grab a chance, and based on these stats, let's legislate accordingly. Let's make it happen. I mean, sounds like selfish in a way, but why them and not us? That's the way I'm thinking sometimes for Australia. I mean, given that we have this kind of pragmatic justifications handy, why don't we do the same in Australia? I mean, I know it sounds really passionate about that, but I think that Australia can also definitely can do this. And again, maybe because I'm also from Brisbane, I also like to conclude with the philosophical justifications, because apart from the pragmatic, it's really important that we also have philosophical justification. So, and Plato's philosophy, particularly his views on knowledge, as a pathway to truth and enlightenment, establishes and provides a foundation to understand green and diamond open access. So Plato shows knowledge as inherently valuable, leading individuals toward higher understanding, making informed decisions, and ideal forms of truth. Therefore, in this context, we understand that green and diamond open access practice promote the democratization of knowledge, supporting the Platonic ideal that wisdom should not be hidden behind walls, but made accessible to all seekers of truth. And apart from Plato, what we also can say is that we also have Foucault. So Foucault, through his vision, thoughts, and let's say philosophy, modern philosopher, I can say, through his work, L'archéologie du savoir, the knowledge of the archaeology of knowledge in English. talks about and highlights the power of knowledge. It's never neutral. So those that they hold this capacity, they are deeply entangled with power structures. And he also argues that whoever holds this knowledge and its dissemination will power over societal forms, behaviors, and even truths. Considering this, green and diamond open access challenge the traditional power structures in academic publishing by redistributing control over who can access and share knowledge. So, giving this permission to researchers to self-archive or publish their work free of charges for authors and readers, definitely these business models disrupt the gatekeeping role of commercial publishers, and again, further supports this notion of democratization of knowledge and making it more accessible. So some of the references that you might want to reflect on, and of course, open to questions. And once again, thank you for this chance. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We have time for some questions. Okay, wait. This might not be about your presentation. It's more about you. I'm absolutely impressed that you're doing your second PhD. I just want to know where does this madness come from?
It's already done.
Is it done?
I'm 41 years old. If you want to start calculation first.
My word. Well, congratulations
Thanks a lot.
to you. And thank you so much for this presentation.
I just wanted to ask you your general thoughts on the chief scientist's response, in terms of her plan or her outlook for an open access strategy for Australia. So she released that in August.
Oh, okay.
Your thoughts on that?
You talk about the Dr. Catherine Foley's. Yeah, that was 2022. I mean,
Well, yeah, but she also responded this year in terms of she had some initiatives in mind for a national approach to open access in terms of making research available via like a model situation.
Yeah, I mean, this is the public funded research outcome. So the publicly funded research outcome, it's already there, settled. But what I'm saying is to improve the scholarly communication, there should be a provision for open access. Can be legislated. I mean, we can draw lessons from overseas, and I mean, it's not. This should happen, or there's no any kind of difficulty in terms of the law here is different. I mean, it's a common law or civil law over there. The thing is that needs are exactly the same. Needs to access and have further access opportunities to information resources and research outcomes is exactly the same. I still recall that when I was interviewing people from different disciplines, so for example from biology, they were saying, I want my outcome, research outcome to be accessed today, not even after 6 minutes, because that's going to have a great impact on the health welfare. So I discovered something new and important pattern or something, but I would like to be disclosed, to share with people, because this is actually for us, the balance set outside, for the public good. I mean, that's actually what it should be. And I'll definitely try to, I mean, I'm not quite a known person or a great academic, but I try to read Dr. Foley and disclose my interest and concern at the same time, and offer myself in case for support or discussion about open access. But I think that we can, and I think that also this conference is quite helpful and can help me with that.
So just something, and I think useful for yourself as well. You know, like we do the conference, and it's all parts of the world, and it's obviously prohibited to move from Australia and sort of engage in the wider community. However, next year, this time, the ICDE conference is in New Zealand, so that's not too far away. I'd have a look at that yourself as well.
Yeah.
Because there's again a wide community of people to engage with, And then also when you were in Belgium, did you meet your Honoric professor?
I met Miss Janssen, Professor Janssens from KU Leuven University. I met also Professor Van Zimmelen from University of Hamburg. I also met Professor Hohenholz from University of Amsterdam.
Okay.
So I met some people that they're also in the open access discussion. They do support open access. But in Belgium, I can, oh my God, it's a really complex country. I mean, it's a federal country, 10 million people, 4 governments, 3 foreign languages. So I also speak French and Dutch because I was working in the Flemish part of Belgium. So, and now I mean, so the Flemish part is more proactive, but they don't have legislate accordingly. Whereas the French-speaking part, they're not so proactive, but they have already introduced in the French-speaking Belgium copyright, they have already introduced an access provision, which is weird. But we talk about the same country. But again, as I said, there is the Brussels government, the French-speaking government, the Dutch-speaking, French-speaking government, and the German-speaking government. So these 4 governments, it's a federal, like Australia. Weird, right?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I'm just curious in terms of like going down the legend of changing copyright law, that how quickly does it change the access component, not the open access?
That's going to be the final outcome of the Act. So the Act has a process, so we have the bill, and then to have the first speech, second speech, you know, that's the process, the lawyer from houses, and then should receive a royal assent. So that's going to be, I mean, needs some extra time, but I think that if we manage to have this bill or this amendment introduced somehow from higher authorities, I think that's going to be a success. We have to reach that point. But again, as I said, it's already, I'm glad that over here in Australia, they are quite well aware about open access, regardless that, I mean, in my discipline, they confuse that with free access. With open access, they just have a specific misunderstanding. Because sometimes there's a lack of training. I mean, you have to train these people to understand. I mean, no, it's not exactly about free access. It has to do with charges, but it's not exactly this. But I think that our mission, say, might be that if we are able to give that proposal and be addressed for discussion as a bill, I think that's going to be a success. Because then it's going to be a matter of procedure as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Just before you leave, speakers, let me just give you one of these cards. So OEG has, instead of giving speakers